Now let's take a look at the facade pattern in practice over on the node side. So real quick, as these demos and as the patterns start to get more complicated, I'm going to try and pull some of that complication out and keep just the essence of the pattern so that we don't lose what we're trying to accomplish with the pattern in a whole bunch of implementations. So I'm going to, for this one anyway, keep everything in the same file just so we can refer back to everything. If you want to see, or you're still curious about pulling things apart and having different objects and services in different files, go back and watch module 3 if you didn't watch module 3, and I do a lot of that over there. In the facade pattern anyway, I'm going to keep it simple so that we don't lose the idea of the facade in all of the implementation of having everything split out. So that being said, I've taken our task object that we've been using all along and I've changed it around to be just properties. So this.name, this.priority, this.user, this.completed, all of those things are right here in task. And because we don't always get to pick the things that we deal with, I've created this task service. And task service is not cool. This service has a series of functions that are in the module pattern, unfortunately, not the revealing module pattern, and it looks kind of gross, and it's hard to see what's going on, but that's what we deal with, right? That's the whole point of what we're trying to deal with the facade pattern. So I've got these series of functions that allow me to interact with tasks, but I have to call them all individually, and there's no overlapping. So what it looks like now when we're dealing with a new task, on line 27, I've newed up a task, and then when I want to complete a task, I actually have to call the task service and complete the task, and then if it actually completed, I have to call 3 methods in order to get it all done. And that's just the way that API works, and the API kind of stinks, and that's just what we've got to deal with. So what I want to do now is take that gross chaos of dealing with this API and all these one-off function calls I have to make, and if you've been doing this for very long, you've probably come across an API that you had to deal with or a service that you had to deal with that made you do some things that you didn't want to have to do. And it was gross and you just didn't want to do it. Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at with this task service. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a wrapper or a facade on top of this service to make it look better. Now, the difference between the facade pattern and the decorator pattern is I'm not adding functionality. The decorator pattern was actually adding and manipulating the functionality of the original task. In this case, I'm not adding anything. I'm just covering up and creating a better interface for exactly the same functionality. So that's the difference really between the facade pattern and the decorator pattern. So let's do that real quick and clean this up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a wrapper. And we're just going to call it task service wrapper. And all task service wrapper is going to be is just a module. So if you remember from module 3, the module pattern just is a function that returns an object, and that object consists of things. And that's actually what our task service is a module. And just a minute ago, I said that our task service isn't even using the revealing module pattern. It makes it kind of ugly to look at. Well, let's build our task service wrapper properly so that we're doing it right. And what we want to do is, if you look down here, we want to complete the task, and then we want to notify that it's been completed and then save. So what we're really going to do in our task service wrapper is we're going to create a function that does complete and notify. And we're actually going to create a function that's going to do that. And the revealing module pattern says that I'm just going to return something that looks like that so that I can see. Actually, we'll clean it up so it looks a little better. So I can see what methods are public and what's available out to the world. And now let's go create that function. So var complete and notify equals a function. And then we probably need to pass in task. And then I'm going to take all of this code that's in my main and put it in my wrapper. So now var complete and notify is going to call task service to complete call task service to complete, and then if it's completed, it's going to set the complete date, notify of completion, and save. So I can now get rid of all this code down here and switch this over to task service wrapper dot complete and notify. Now, one thing that I'm doing here, and this is demo, but instead of now creating a new instance of this task service wrapper, and we're not creating instances, I know, but I'm just going to go ahead and execute this. So now task service wrapper is the return statement. So task service wrapper is now just an object that is complete and notified. Normally, if we're doing the full common.js pattern, it'd be in a different file, and this would be module.exports, and then I'd return the executed function, and that's essentially what I've done here. So now my task service wrapper complete and notify is going to execute, and everything will just work. And if we watch our console.log, when I run this, you'll see all these three things have happened. We've set it a complete date, and we've saved, and we'll see a notification happen, notifying user of the completion of task. All that stuff will happen, but now I've got one line of code sitting in my main.js. So let's run that, node task.js, and there you go, completing my task. My task was completed on notifying John, and then you see completed is true, completed date is now. So that is the basic facade pattern. It's just that easy, complete and notify. We've just created a wrapper that wraps around our task service. And like I said before, we're not adding any functionality to task service. So that's the decorator pattern. Here we're just maintaining the same functionality, but we're just doing it in a clean way instead of having this chaos that we had before up in our task service.